You'll have to work nights. It's a 2-by-2 shift. Are you sure it's right for you? Yeah, it would be perfect for me. I'm in college during the day, Nancy told the manager when she applied for a job at the restaurant. Okay, but be warned, it's not the most physically demanding job. You're on your feet all the time. You have to work with your hands, plates, forks, spoons. You'll have to be strong enough, because you are all so small, skinny, clarified the potential boss. Yes, everything is enough, Nancy assured him. Good, then come out Wednesday night, it'll be easier. We have the most guests on weekends. You'll have to work those shifts. I'll see you Wednesday, Nancy said. She needed the money. She grew up in a poor family. She was raised by a single mother. Miranda worked at a technical school, was a modest, quiet woman. She was a little over 50, but had to retire on disability due to poor health and heart problems. Nancy had no father. To be exact, somewhere he was, of course, but he had never taken part in his daughter's upbringing. The girl knew that he had vanished as soon as she was born. It was a painful subject for Miranda. She did not like to remember or talk about him. Nancy did not torment her mother or torment her with questions. A philosophical view of life was passed on to her. What had been, had been. Marriage. After the birth of her daughter, Miranda never married. Romanov did not twist with anyone, led a quiet, modest life. But she and her daughter had a warm relationship. There was harmony in the family. They helped each other, supported each other, did everything together. And that, they both thought, was the most important thing. Nancy studied well. She was always a bright girl, one of the best in her class. Teachers predicted a great future for her, thought she would enter the best university. But after school, Nancy didn't take any chances and went to teacher training college. She had problems with her self-esteem. She thought that university was too high for her, and besides, it was always possible to get higher education after secondary school. Her mother always taught her to be modest and not to encroach on too much. Better a bird in the hand than a crane in the sky, she liked to tell her daughter. College began. Nancy attended classes with pleasure. She liked everything. Her classmates turned out to be nice people, though most of them were not as intelligent as the girl. Besides, only a few of them wanted to become teachers in the future. Most of them came just to get their diplomas. Nancy was really happy to be a teacher and to teach the children of the lower school. She loved children, easily found contact with them, was patient, caring, and yet fully enjoy carefree studenthood. The girl did not have the opportunity. The family lived poorly, her mother was often ill, a lot of money was spent on medicines. Plus the age of Nancy herself was such that she wanted to dress up and get other pleasures, at least small ones. She decided to look for a part-time job that would not distract her from her studies. Ideal would be the option of working in the evenings or at night. The girl decided to look for options in entertainment venues. She decided to start with a restaurant located near her house. Nancy had never been there before because she couldn't afford it. At most once every couple of months, she and her friends would go to a cafe, taking the cheapest dishes. The ambience of the restaurant stunned her. Rich decorations, gold monograms, figurative, furniture stuffed with velvet. The menu she decided not to even look at. Not to get upset, she was in a completely different world. A world in which she could only be an attendant. The other she just didn't believe in. Nancy approached the receptionist and timidly asked if they were looking for employees. The girl expected to get a waitress position, but would be happy with any other job. It occurred to her that a place like this must surely pay good money to all employees. The administrator, evaluating, looked at Nancy and arrogantly replied, "Well, in general, we have a full staff now. We are not looking for anyone, so I can't do anything." Nancy was about to leave in a distressed state, but a young woman in a white tunic caught up with her on the way out. "Hi," she said in a cheerful voice. "My name is Kelly, and I work here as the chief. Actually, Lisa is our administrator. Did she lie to you? We're looking for employees. She's just very jealous of all the pretty girls, can't stand competition. And you, girl, you're beautiful. The only thing is, I don't know if you're going to be happy with that. We're looking through the courts. It's a black job. But there is a possibility, so to speak, career growth in the future to move to waiters. On the plus side. Collective, we have a friendly, good, and pay well by the standards of our city. So keep that in mind." "Got it. Thank you." Nancy didn't hesitate. "It's a good fit for me. Who can I talk to about employment? Come on, I'll take you to our personnel officer, Kelly answered and led the girl towards the office. The aforementioned conversation with the recruiter took place there. On the way out of the restaurant, she again ran into the receptionist, Lisa. This again gifted her with an arrogant look. She was definitely not going to work out with her. Nancy thought sadly, "That's okay, but Kelly is quite nice and friendly. Surely there are other good employees." The girl decided not to tell her mom about her part-time job. She knew she would be upset to hear that her daughter had to work nights. The woman already felt guilty for not being able to provide Nancy with a decent, in her opinion, childhood with travels, plenty of toys and delicious food, and, most importantly, with a reliable shoulder of her father by her side. Still, Nancy wanted to share her joy with someone. She didn't have many friends, just a few buddies. The girl had faced envy and intrigue a couple of times, all because of her attractiveness. After that, she stopped believing in female friendship. But she had a good, reliable companion with whom she had been since high school. It was her classmate Christopher, a reliable guy, not much of a talker but responsible kind. Christopher also grew up in a broken home. His dad died 10 years ago, hit by a car, and his mom and little sister were left alone. Christopher had to grow up early and take on his shoulders the responsibility for several women at once. But he coped well, did not complain, was for all support and support. Since high school, he worked part-time at a construction site, so now he was already a foreman. His hands were golden, all in his father, plus a head on his shoulders and a sober mind. In general, Christopher from childhood wanted to become an artist. He looked at Shishkin's landscapes and Kramsky's portraits, dreamed of his own exhibitions. Teachers at the art school in one voice spoke of the boy's talent and predicted a great future for him. But the guy had to provide for the family, to help his mother to put on his sister's feet. Plus Christopher, despite his young age, already dreamed of a wife. And he saw Nancy in that role. He'd been in love with her since elementary school, secretly, he thought, though everyone around him noticed his affection. She was no mystery to them. Nancy felt it too, but unfortunately, her heart did not lie with her classmate. The girl understood perfectly well that he was a kind, caring, and reliable young man who would surely make a wonderful husband and father in the future. But she could not help herself. The heart, as you know, cannot command. In high school, Christopher and Nancy even tried dating. The girl thought that in time she could fall in love with her classmate and everything would work out. But it didn't. After a few dates and kisses, the girl realized that her heart was not coming true. At the touches and words of her fiancé, it was decided to remain friends. This hurt Christopher, but he still, like a faithful knight, stayed by his lady's side. He was always ready to give her his shoulder, comfort her, or share her joy. That's why after the restaurant, Nancy went straight to her friend. They lived in neighboring houses. "Christopher, I found a part-time job." "Yay. Now mommy and me are gonna feel better. I'm so happy for me, like a bird girl. That's awesome." "Good for you. Where did you get a job?" Christopher asked. "There is a peacock's nest near the house," replied the friend. "Not bad waitressing," Christopher clarified. "Not really," laughed the girl. "Washing dishes, but it's temporary. I was promised career advancement. They said that if everything goes well, soon we'll be transferred to waitresses. Money is promised, good work in the evenings will not interfere with studies. So it's all working out great." "Oh, Nancy, I don't know. You don't appreciate yourself. You deserve a better job than the ladies in the plate. Spoons for the rich." "All right, try me. I'll be there for you if you need me." "Christopher." "Thank you." Nancy was happy again. "I bought some brownies, so let's celebrate my employment. Put the kettle on. Come on. It's my first job after all." "I hope it won't be too much trouble for you," replied the kind-hearted Christopher. Wednesday evening, Nancy went to work. She realized that she couldn't deceive her mother for long because she had to explain her absence late at night. But for now, she decided to lie that they were at college preparing for the student spring, painting decorations and rehearsing a lot late at night. Miranda didn't like this arrangement, but she decided not to cross her daughter. That's how little joy there was in life. Let at least the socializing with her peers be enjoyable. Nancy entered the peacock's nest through the service entrance. The room was stuffy, noisy, and the odors of roasting meat lingered in the air. Despite it being a weekday, There were many guests in the room, the staff hurried and bustling about. Nancy reached the kitchen, moving along the wall. She didn't want to disturb anyone. There was even some harmony in the bustle. In the kitchen, she was met by her supervisor. She told her exactly what to do, where to take the detergents, where to put the dishes. Everything was simple, but because of the new surroundings and the multitude of strangers, Nancy felt a little dizzy. Luckily, Kelly walked into the kitchen at that moment. "Oh, the new girl," she shouted happily in her loud voice. "It's good to see you. Who to offend?" said the girl. "Thank you," replied the girl. The words of her colleague acquired her. It became more fun to work. Nancy was accustomed to hard physical labor. She could not be called white-knuckle and not feminine. She helped her mother in everything, and some of the responsibilities in the house rested solely on her shoulders. Nevertheless, the work in the restaurant had its own specifics. It was monotonous. Plus, there were strangers around. It was loud. By the end of the shift at 12, Nancy almost couldn't feel her hands. Her legs and head were buzzing. But the girl decided it was just out of habit. Time would pass, and she would get into the right rut. Besides, it became morally easier when she received money for her labor. The pluses of this restaurant was that the washers were paid immediately after shifts. It was a small amount of money, but Nancy was happy about it. Now she would be able to pay her own rent, which was a weight off her mom's shoulders. Plus, buy herself some outfits and spend on other little pleasures. The girl quietly turned the key to the apartment. She didn't want to wake up her mother, but she didn't sleep. "Daughter, is that you?" "Yes, Mommy, I do not worry. Everything is fine. Sleep. You're very sick." "Maybe, but your rehearsals, they take a lot of energy." "No, Mom, I'm fine. Don't worry, I'll keep going and rehearsals will be fine." Gradually, Nancy began to get to know the staff. Kelly was not deceived. The restaurant really did employ mostly good, simple people. Everyone supported each other and helped out when needed. But we were talking about the kitchen and service areas. There were arrogant guys among the hall workers and waiters, hostesses and administrators. The same Lisa would still look down on Nancy when we met and make a remark to her, "Don't pay attention to her." "What a girl. She's in her 30s, she's not married yet, so she's freaking out," Kelly said to her. Nancy was once again reassured by the words of this cheerful, wise colleague. She was used to the team and the schedule. It wasn't easy to combine work and study, but there was nowhere to go. The young organism had enough for 5-6 for sleep, plus her bathroom. A caring friend gave her on March 8th orthopedic pillow. "It's rushed and small, but at least you will do it right," he told Nancy, handing over the present. Of the unpleasant moments was a frank conversation with her mother. As the girl supposed, she still had to tell her close person about the true reason for late absences from home. Spring had already passed, and a bigger alibi in the form of rehearsal was not working. Miranda clutched at her heart at first. No, she wasn't intimidated by the fact that her daughter worked as a dishwasher. She didn't divide professions into worthy and unworthy. What frightened her was the fact that it was hard for her daughter to combine it all, that she had too much on her fragile, girlish shoulders. But Nancy reassured her mother by telling her that the work was not a burden to her at all, and that she was soon to be promoted to waitress. Besides, it was true. Miranda hustled and arranged for Nancy to be transferred to waitressing in the lounge after their longtime employee Katya went on maternity leave. She was about to go into labor. Miranda calmed down and realized that her daughter had finally grown up. However, Katya still had to live up to the maternity leave. In the meantime, the girl continued to polish the fancy dishes to a shine. With the arrival of heat in the dark working room became very stuffy. Something broke in the ventilation system. On the background of this increased stress in the college, Nancy sometimes did not feel well, darkened in the eyes, cramped legs. At such times, she would briefly go outside for a breath of fresh air. A breath of fresh air made her consciousness clearer, and it became easier. On one of the working evenings, the dishwasher's dishes went bad again. She set the plates aside, afraid of breaking them, and walked down the wall to the exit. The patio was quiet. It was early May. The air was saturated with the scents of blossoming cherry, apricot, and plum trees. The night was starry, quiet, and tender. None of the people were around at that time. At such a time, one would walk hand in hand with one's beloved. They are washing away the glasses, Nancy thought to herself. but she was happier that the dizziness had gone. That meant that it was safe to go back to work. But the girl decided to allow herself a couple more minutes to spend in the fresh air and enjoy the peace. Suddenly, a man of about 35 years old appeared from the corner of the restaurant. He was decently dressed, but barely on his feet. At first, Nancy thought it was an over-alcoholized guest, but then she realized that the man was sober, but not well. The man collapsed to his knees. Nancy ran over to him. "What's wrong with you?" the girl asked fearfully. The stranger threw up. "I must have poisoned you with something." "Barely," the man said, thinking that the fresh air would make me feel better. "But no, call an ambulance." "Yes, of course, right away," said Nancy. With trembling hands, she took the phone out of her pocket and dialed 03. Then she grabbed the man under his arms and slowly led him to the stairs to sit down. "Don't worry, the ambulance is on its way." "The doctors will help you," she reassured the stranger. "What's your name?" Quietly, he asked. "Nancy," he repeated. "Thank you. No way." "Be quiet, don't waste your strength." "I'll get you some water now," said the girl. Don't go." "I'm terribly ashamed to say I'm a grown man, but now I'm scared like a kid. I am generally strong, very rarely get sick, so always in such cases lost," said the man. "It's okay. I understand everything." "Don't be afraid. I'm still around, I won't go anywhere," Nancy reassured him, still holding his hand. "Are you an angel?" the stranger asked her. After that, he threw up again. Sorry, Nancy couldn't contain her laughter. The man himself laughed a little. Soon the ambulance arrived. At the sound of the flashing lights, the restaurant staff came running. Lisa appeared beside Nancy and the stranger. "Oh my God, what happened here?" "You did this to her," she gave Nancy an angry look. "No, she had nothing to do with it. I poisoned myself," the man managed to say before the doctors came to him. "How awful. I promise we'll get to the bottom of this and fire those responsible." Lisa didn't stop. The stranger was taken away by ambulance. Panic spread in the restaurant, and they started looking for someone to blame. Nancy was taken to the management office, but she got herself into a lot of trouble. "They say do not do good, you will not get evil," thought the girl. A lump came up to her throat. She could barely hold back from crying. "If you're involved here, I'll give you a crap you are," walked back and forth Lisa, to Nancy's relief. Soon another person walked into the office, a young blonde man dressed discreetly but expensively. The kind of thing that immediately catches the eye. He was agitated, but not aggressive. And Nancy had not seen him in the peacock's nest before. "Charles, but finally something has to be done about it. There's a scandal coming. Our reputation is at stake." Lisa's hysterical. "Calm down, I'll get it all out. But first, bring me up to speed. What happened here?" "It's all her." She pointed her finger at Nancy. Lisa got up out of her chair like that. "My name is Charles. I'm the co-owner of this restaurant." A man introduced himself. "Nancy Patterson Sudu." "Dumpster," the girl replied. Charles was clearly surprised to find out who such an attractive girl worked for. Still, he remained on the working plane. "So Nancy, what happened here?" he asked her. The girl told him what happened. "So he poisoned himself in our restaurant?" Charles asked. "It would appear so," Nancy said. "I'll go to the hospital and talk to the man. If it's really the fault of our kitchen, we'll deal with it. Lisa, tomorrow we'll organize a general cleaning of all the rooms, a forced day off." "Thank you, Nancy, you are free to go," Charles said and walked the girl to the door. Nancy got home on shaky legs and collapsed on the bed. She cried into her pillow and then fell asleep like a dead man. Fortunately, she had 2 days off. She went to the next shift with fear in her heart. She was afraid that she would be scolded again. But everything went well. The girl did not receive claims against her. From her colleagues, she learned that Charles really settled everything. Fortunately, the poisoning of the guest turned out to be not so serious. From the hospital, he was immediately released home. Charles met with the man, apologized, and presented a gift from the institution, a fruit basket and a bottle of expensive champagne. The apology was accepted. Nancy decided to forget that night like a bad dream. But not so. Coming out of work on the street, she again ran into that very stranger. The girl staggered, thinking she was imagining things. But no, it was a real man. The same one, just now standing firmly on his feet. What if he was? They were being held by a huge bouquet of flowers. "Nancy, I knew you hadn't quit your job," he said. "Quit? Why would you say that?" The girl was surprised. "I thought I'd thank you. In a way, you saved my life, or I could have died under the fence. I bought some flowers, came here, asked for the receptionist. I remembered your name. But they told me you'd quit," the man explained. "Lisa," Nancy said, barely audibly. "What?" The stranger was surprised. No, nothing," the girl replied. "Go on." "Oh yes, you recognize me. I'm the man you called an ambulance for a couple of days ago. My name is John. I am very grateful to you, so I would like to give you these flowers," he said, holding out a bouquet to Nancy. Such gorgeous ethnic arrangements. The girl had only seen them in movies before. She was confused, but John continued, "Don't be shy. It's from the bottom of my heart," he said. "Thank you," Nancy said very nicely. "I'm glad you liked it. But I'm going to go, or I don't want you to get into any more trouble because of me," John said, and looked behind her back. Nancy turned around and saw Lisa behind her. She was standing at the service entrance, smoking. "Yes, of course. Don't get sick again," Nancy John said and walked quickly toward the house. On the way, however, she was suddenly stopped by a hand on her shoulder. The girl cried out, afraid that it was a maniac. But it was Charles. "I apologize for frightening her. I didn't mean to," he said in a line that clutched at his heart. "I was embarrassed to present you with flowers in front of the staff, but I felt I had to do it. You saved our guest's life and, in a sense, our reputation. A man could have died and it would have been such a scandal. So this bouquet is for you. Though I can see you have no shortage of flowers. Not recently." "No, you're right," Nancy replied. This time she didn't hesitate and immediately picked up a bouquet no less sumptuous than the first. "Thank you. But it's very late for me now." "Of course I understand. Shall I escort you?" Charles asked. No, I'll do it myself," said Nancy, and walked confidently toward the house. At that moment she felt like the heroine of a 19th century novel. In the morning, Nancy woke up and caught the surprised look of her mother. "Nancy, what do you mean?" she asked. "I hope you haven't strayed from the path of truth and gone downhill? Where did you get such gorgeous flowers from? Decent girls don't get them. But Moth, it's all right. I'm a decent girl, it's okay. I still wash dishes at work, that's all. And flowers to say thank you. It just so happens I saved a man's life recently. So they said thank you for that," the girl explained. "Daughter, how did it all happen, and why didn't you tell me anything?" Mom was surprised. Nancy told her the story about the poisoning and finished her story by saying that she was already an adult and her mother had no reason to worry. Literally a week later, she was transferred to waitressing. Katya went on maternity leave, but Kelly, smiling mysteriously, hinted to her that it was not only about her colleague's pregnancy. The supervisor had hustled. Nancy tried to ignore it. Though she loved love stories, she preferred to be realistic in life and realized that misalliance was a dangerous thing. Charles was sympathetic to her, but they were from different backgrounds, which meant nothing could happen between them. Besides, she needed to focus on her promotion. Waitressing was a different level of responsibility. She had a lot of new things to learn. She began to cross paths with Charles more often in the hospitality room. Nancy caught his interested glances, but always kept her eyes downcast when they met. Every cricket knows its own nook and cranny, she mentally repeated her mother's admonition. And yet Charles was persistent. He knew the numbers of all the employees, including Nancy, and began corresponding with her. At first he asked her if she liked being a waitress, if she was doing well, if she had any questions or requests. Then he gradually moved on to personal topics, and then he got bold enough to ask her out on a date. Date. The girl was taken aback, but still agreed. Was not, she thought, after all. In life, too, the scenario of the fairy tale repeats itself. Surprisingly, in the same period of time, John appeared on the horizon. His bouquet still stood in a vase on Nancy's desk for a long time. The flowers had dried up long ago, but still pleased the girl with their beauty. And yet it was time to say goodbye to them. And only at this moment Nancy noticed that the bouquet was enclosed with a note of the following content. "Nancy, I like you very much, but I am afraid to be intrusive. I invite you to go out on a date at any time that is convenient for you. If you agree, let me know in Messenger, followed by a number." Nancy was taken aback. At the same time, her heart exulted. She decided not to let her mom know because she would surely have nipped it in the bud. The girl plucked up courage and wrote to John. He was happy and set up a date. The meeting was to take place the day after the rendezvous was with Charles. Here comes the love triangle, the girl thought dreamily. One of my favorite plots. How interesting it was to read about it. But how interesting to encounter it in life, thought the girl. Nancy decided to go on a date in chronological order. Charles called her first, so she went out with him first. It was hot June. "Do you know what a cathedral is?" asked the girl's beau. "No, it is the first time I have heard of it," replied Nancy. "Then I will show you," replied the lad with a smile. The young people went to the local river. Charles helped his companion to stand on the board and told her how to use the paddle to sail in the right direction. It turned out to be a lot of fun. At first, Nancy did not succeed. She even fell into the water and felt very clumsy. But Charles jumped in after her and helped her up. The couple laughed. Nancy no longer felt awkward, but felt something pleasant. Her heart echoed at the sight of Charles. Her eyes filled with light. Her lips formed into a smile. She was in love, for the first time in her life. Charles felt the same way. The young people were easy and comfortable together. But the next day the girl had a date with the next John. He was older and more serious than Charles, and the place for the meeting was chosen accordingly. A theater production of Chekhov. Nancy was delighted. Then the beau invited his date to a restaurant. "It is not as pathos as the Peacock's Nest, but more cozy, stylish," John explained. He was not deceived. This institution liked Nancy much more than the one in which she worked. During dinner, the man confessed that he was tired of empty connections and self-serving girls who were eager to lay their hands on his fortune. Nancy did not elaborate on the exact sums in question, but realized it was 1 million. The man owned a chain of plumbing stores. He was married but divorced, leaving his wife a country house and a car. "I did it with ease. I know I'll make it again. I came from a simple family. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a locksmith. We didn't have much money. I always wanted to get on my feet and help my family. And I did. I built a business, got money. I've been able to afford a lot of things for a long time now. But what you can't earn so easily is unselfish love. So you wandered around looking for it," John said sadly. Nancy could not believe her ears, but somehow she thought the man was sincere. And yet the spark between them did not flare up. With Charles, Nancy felt at ease, but with John she did not. Perhaps it was the age difference. Perhaps it was status. Charles came from a well-to-do family too, but it was mostly business and capital that ran the place. And Cindy's mother. She owned a large share of the restaurant where the girl worked. Both Charles and John asked her out again. Nancy this time agreed to both appointments she decided to give. John plus wanted to enjoy this wonderful moment when then interested in two beaux at once. Miranda immediately realized that her daughter had some suitors, and well-to-do, because she returned home with large bouquets. And the woman saw through the window how Nancy was driven home in an expensive car. "Daughter, please keep your head cold," she told her daughter. She promised not to lose her mind, although her coolness had long since left her. After the second date, Nancy was finally convinced that she wanted to be with Charles. In addition, he suggested that she go out with him. The girl agreed, and John honestly admitted that nothing could be between them. He was obviously upset, but nobly accepted the girl's choice. "Well, if that's what you decide, so be it," he told her. "But we can still be friends." Nancy tried to smooth things over, but she realized that she had said something stupid. "No, I'm not friends with women. I like to be happy." "And goodbye," said John and drove off in his expensive car. Nancy felt awkward and even a little sad, but these feelings disappeared immediately after Charles kissed her. Their romance developed rapidly: long walks under the moon, trips around the city, parks, cafes, streets, meetings, sunsets and sunrises, long conversations. The girl believed that she had found her soulmate. Charles wrote her poems and played the guitar. At first, the couple hid their relationship at work. They encrypted as best they could, but casual glances and touches, smiles, all these little things spoke for themselves. Colleagues suspected that a workplace romance had erupted between the boss and the waitress. Some, like Kelly and individual kitchen employees, cheered for Nancy. "It's like a Cinderella story. You deserve it," the chief told her. However, there were more detractors. Many, especially girls, perceived this fact with envy. And the strongest of all, this office romance hurt Lisa. If before she and without that picked on Nancy on trifles, now decided to unleash in a real war. Constant reprimands and threats of dismissal. The waitress did not want to tie personal working, so did not complain to Charles. Well, she should have. He would have gotten her a long time ago. You do realize that bitch isn't just pissed off. She's had her eye on Charles for a long time. He's a good-looking fiancé. Kelly opened her eyes. "I don't know why you're still waitressing for us. You could have been promoted by your husband or even released from work. I mean, their family's got plenty of money, although Mom would be against it. Cindy's a rich lady, but she's stingy. You'd be hard-pressed to find one like her." Nancy didn't say anything back. She never wanted to sit on a man's neck. But she would not refuse to be relieved of some of her duties and make her life easier. As she usually did. All she could do was, "Christopher, you know, I'm really tired of combining school and work. It's not easy, though. I wish I had a strong shoulder to lean on," she told her friend. He didn't know what to say. He decided to try to realize his dream and start earning money by painting. It was not a lucrative business. He was well aware of that. The money would be enough to minimally provide for Nancy. At least until he earned a name for himself, he would not be able to. So the lad decided not even to fight for his lover's heart. If there is someone who can provide her life and dreams, he is ready to give up. Nancy and Charles' romance continued to gain momentum. Summer was followed by fall and winter began. Relationships in the couple were forming good, young people were getting used to each other. True, gradually the ardor of the guy extinguished. He began to give the girl less and less gifts. The bouquets became much more modest. When Nancy said that it was difficult for her to combine work and study, Charles did not say anything in response. But by New Year's Eve, he promoted her to hostess at another restaurant owned by their family. Nancy was overjoyed. Although in reality the raise wasn't that big. However, the girl had 6 months to finish her studies. In the summer, she would receive her diploma. Nancy planned to leave the restaurant and get a job in her profession. Even if teachers are not paid that much, but it would be the job she dreamed of. On Valentine's Day, Charles proposed to her. Nancy was not expecting it. When the guy got down on one knee in front of him and asked the cherished question, she cried, but answered yes. "You could have bought a bigger ring." "The diamonds are tiny," Kelly said, looking at the ring. Nancy was visiting. "But the main thing is that he's decided to marry like an honest man. But my advice to you is to stay away from his mother. I don't want to scare you, but there's talk around here that she doesn't like you, Miss Alliance, all that." A lump came to Nancy's throat, but she decided not to take the words to heart. She had only seen Cindy a couple of times. Charles was not in favor of bringing the bride and her mother together. The restaurant hostess was indeed arrogant, cold, aloof. She was very learned with her noble roots. Meanwhile, she owed her high financial position to her husband Robert, a native of workers who knew how to twist and turn. In the 90s, he, as they call it, got into the wave cleverly privatized warehouse space, which then rented out in triple-digit prices, promoted and bought his wife a restaurant as a fun business peacock's nest went. And soon the family acquired another establishment smaller in size and away from the center, but nevertheless, also profitable. Charles was their only son. He was born with a golden spoon in his teeth. His mother never denied him anything. But thanks to his father's restraint, Charles did not grow up spoiled, although he had a crush. He liked to live large. He liked branded things and delicacies. He was very romantic and in love. At the same time, he never looked at the status of his chosen women. He was just interested in pretty girls. That's why Cindy didn't pay much attention to his affair with Nancy. He'll play around and leave her, the woman thought. However, the story divorced in a completely different scenario. Charles fell head over heels in love, forgot himself, and went headlong into the relationship. When Cindy found out that her son did it from behind the lid, as she called Nancy, the proposal threw a scandal. "I didn't raise you to build a family with that defense contractor. Charles, think about it, we'll find you a better date." Why would you do that?" "The janitor's daughter," she shouted at her son, blocking him from their luxurious home. "Robert, at least tell him." But the father wisely remained silent. He was not happy about his son's choice either, but he realized that it was better not to get involved in such stories. The important thing was that Charles understood that it was his choice and that he was responsible for it. Charles pushed his mother away. "We're getting married. For what it's worth. If you don't approve of my choice, we can stop talking." "Your will." He slammed the door and ran out into the courtyard. That same evening, he picked up Nancy and took her to his apartment. "We're going to live together now," he said, as if cut off. Nancy was stunned and very sad about her future mother-in-law. But even more upsetting to her was her own mother's attitude towards this union. "Daughter, you'll have problems living with him, you'll see. If you don't live richly, there's nothing to start with. What's wrong with Christopher? He's our equal. A simple, good guy. He's been in love with you for a long time. You should marry him." Mother wailed. "Mom, but I love Charles." "How can you not understand? How can you all not understand anything?" Nancy, almost for the first time in her life, allowed herself to raise her voice at her mother. Then she apologized to her, but she didn't give up her position. Miranda humbly accepted the situation. The young people moved in together and began to prepare for the wedding. The celebration was to take place in early summer. At first, Charles was not going to count on the financial help of parents, wanted to lay all the financial expenses on himself. After the quarrel, he actually stopped communicating with them, or rather, with his father. He saw his mother occasionally, but still, he didn't answer her calls. But in early May, his parents came to Charles and Nancy's apartment to bury the hatchet. Cindy cried and said she couldn't do without her blood. The father said, "We will not abandon our son. We will take his choice from the wedding and help him." Nancy was extremely frightened. She could not believe in the sincerity of her feelings and future mother-in-law. However, she knew it was important to her fiancé. Charles had forgiven his parents and accepted the money for the wedding from them. Now the celebration could be made even more lavish. And so it was. Off-site registration arches of flowers, fiddler of many guests, dress code and the color purple. Lots of gourmet hors d'oeuvres at the buffet, shrimp, caviar, moldy cheeses. The wedding in the evening. It was decided to celebrate at the Peacock's Nest, the place that brought the newlyweds together. During the celebration, Cindy behaved decently, smiled a lot, willingly took pictures with the guests, showing a lot of her gold jewelry. Robert was traditionally stingy with his emotions. The bride's mother felt out of place. She was not used to such luxury and wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. It was awkward for her in her simple outfit to be among richly dressed people and to eat delicacies and drink expensive champagne. On the bride's side, there were few people at the wedding. Her great aunt and her family, a few university friends, and Christopher. He tried to hold it together, but it was still noticeable that it hurt him to lose his love. But he realized that, like a young starving artist, he was unlikely to be able to give much to the lady of his heart. Things were working out as well as they could. Yet to the last, Nancy had a feeling that there was a trick lurking somewhere, that such a fairy tale could not happen in her difficult life. She banished these thoughts from her mind and twirled in the dance as if she were a real Cinderella. She was having fun. This despite the fact that she decided not to sing that evening, to remember every moment of it for life. But the one who was not shy of the bottle was Nancy's mother-in-law, so much so that by the end of the evening her morning friendliness was gone. She had clearly had too much to drink and was so drunk that she could barely stand on her feet. When the wedding cake was brought into the hall, she went up to the host and snatched the microphone from him. "Yes, son," she told him, "where you have the ring on your ring finger. Are you married? Probably to a decent one. A girl from a good family. Not like my Charles picked a beggar's brood and now we have to feed her." Nancy was taken aback, and her premonition came true. Charles tried to snatch the microphone from Natalia's mother, pushed his hands away from his mother, and walked. Thought she was screaming with her tongue flying. "So, dear guests, I raised my Charles. I took him to the seas, bought expensive English clothes, took him to tennis. I gave him a better education, and he gave Nancy a better education. He fell in love at home. How can that be? There are so many nice girls around. Here's Clara, for example. Clara, you're here today." "Hello," You know that I wanted you to be my daughter-in-law. Tell me honestly, Charles, what don't you like about Nastia? Father is a banker, mother is a dentist. She's a good-looking girl. I'm sorry, Charles, I love you. Nancy has no skin, no face, not a penny to her name. Father unknown, forgotten by whoever. The mother's some kind of cleaning lady. Do you hear that? Cleaning lady? Why are you with us? Right, Charles? Charles snatched the microphone out of his mother's hands. His father led Cindy toward the exit. The guests were confused and didn't know where to put themselves. Nancy covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Her mother's heart failed and she collapsed. The celebration did not end according to the wedding cortege. And the arrival of the ambulance, Nancy, directly in the wedding dress, went with her mother to the hospital. Christopher arrived shortly thereafter. I hate them all, and Charles and his crazy family, cried Nancy into the shoulder of her faithful friend, standing in the hospital hallway. Mom was right. Nothing good would come of this story. My mommy, I'm sorry I let you down. If only the doctors had saved her. If only I hadn't been alone. Everything will be all right. You're not alone, Christopher comforted her. Charles arrived at the hospital a little later. He looked lost and devastated. When Nancy saw him, she screamed, "Get out." "I can't see you," Nancy, her new husband, tried to reply. "I don't want to hear anything. Go away." The girl wouldn't stop. Charles bowed his head and silently walked towards the exit. Fortunately, the doctors gave Nancy's mother the help she needed, and she recovered quickly. Nancy had been by Charles's side the whole time. She did not see each other during these days. A week later, the mother was discharged, and she and her daughter returned home. Charles arrived at their house shortly afterward. "I wanted to talk it over. I'm ready to burn on my knees with shame. I beg your pardon. I won't speak to her again. I promise. Just come back." Nancy had calmed down a little by now. She spoke in a calm, steady voice, but she was adamant. "No, Charles, it's not going to work to get everything back to the way it was that night overnight. I know it wasn't your fault. But I care more about my own peace and my mom's peace. I don't want to be looked at askew and called defense for the rest of my life. Thank you for everything you've done for me. I'll never forget you, but this is goodbye. Christopher will pick up my things." Charles was still on his knees. Tears were streaming from his eyes, but Nancy was adamant. The boy had no choice but to leave the modest mother-daughter apartment. "I want you to know that I'll be waiting for you anytime," the boy said one last time. When Charles left, Nancy cried herself to tears. "Well, there'll be a daughter. You see, they're no match for us. It's all right. When you've calmed down your grief, you'll find your feminine happiness. Remember the theory of small steps? Gradually, step by step, life will get better." Miranda comforted her. Mom was right. Nancy was going back to her old life. She filed for divorce. The marriage only lasted a few days. She quit her job at the restaurant. She got her college degree and became a certified teacher. Thoughts about Charles still did not give rest, but the girl diligently chased them away. On the background of stress, her health deteriorated. Nancy began to feel sick in the mornings and migraines became more frequent. Nancy wrote it all off as stress, but still she was tormented by suspicions about whether she was pregnant. The girl frankly told her mom about her worries. She sent her to a doctor. The fears were confirmed. Nancy was pregnant. The father of the child was Charles, with whom she had not communicated for a month. The girl was in a stupor. She thought of having an abortion, but her mother talked her out of it. "What's the sin, daughter? No need, we'll grow up somehow. I raised you and we'll raise our grandchild. Nothing, there's life here, but we'll have a little happiness." Her mom changed her mind. Nancy decided not to inform Charles of her pregnancy. She decided to put a definitive end to their story. "Why don't you tell him? He is the father. He has the right to tell him," shared his opinion with Christopher, with whom Nancy was traditionally frank. "No, that's out of the question. Out of sight, out of mind. My child doesn't need a father from that family," Nancy declared categorically. Meanwhile, in connection with the baby's arrival, the expenses were going to be serious. The future mother and grandmother realized it. At the family council, they found a way out of the situation. They should move to the village where they still had a house from their deceased parents, mother, and rent out their city apartment. That way they'd have some extra money, and the child will grow much better in the fresh air. The women also decided that soon after the birth of Nancy will go to work and get a job at the local school, and with a grandson will sit grandmother. And so they did. They gathered their modest belongings and quickly found tenants. The summer was coming to an end. Students from the villages were coming to the city en masse. Many were looking for housing. Mother and daughter rented their one room to a modest girl, a philologist. They asked her to be tidy and left for the village. Christopher drove them in his old car. Everything that is done is for the best, Miranda consoled Nancy. But she was no longer sad so much she imagined herself a mom. The ultrasound showed she was having a girl. Nancy had already chosen a name for her future daughter, Molly. The last name she decided to give her her patronymic left by her grandmother from her real father. The house was located near the center of the settlement. The settlement was small, but it had everything necessary for life stores, post office, bank, and, most importantly for a pregnant woman, her sick mother. The hospital was within walking distance of their new home. The house was small, with old repairs, but cozy. The women quickly put things in order and began to settle in. There was a small vegetable garden, but since nothing was planted there in the spring, there was nothing to harvest in the fall. But good-natured neighbors, who remembered Miranda well, used to treat her with apples, a ray, or a sack of potatoes. And sometimes they treated her with milk and crates of milk. The women lived modestly, on Miranda's pension money from a rented apartment to Nancy's savings. Favor, in recent months she did earn very well in the restaurant and spent by habit little. Besides, she was then largely provided for by Charles. In addition, the girl decided to sell some of the gifts that once gave her the chosen one. She got rid of an expensive phone, a gold bracelet, and a cool hair dryer. The money was spent on things for the future child. In addition, a neighbor girl of about 8 years old could not learn to read, and her parents asked Nancy, as a teacher, to tutor her. Tutoring brought a little money, but it was a help. Sometimes Christopher came to visit. He did men's work, hammering nails, cleaning sewers, fixing furniture, and toward winter he brought a stroller. Not new hand-me-down, but clean, neat, he explained. Nancy and Miranda thanked him warmly. After the boy had left, the woman brought up again the subject of Christopher being just what Nancy needed. See, he's not even leaving you now. And he's not the father of the baby, she told her daughter. But Nancy couldn't help herself. The heart can't help itself. Mom's response to Miranda was to sigh and wave her hands. It was good to see that there were no arguments on other topics between the women. That's how modestly, but quietly and amicably they lived through the winter. And in January, on Christmas Eve, Nancy went into labor. Her water broke unexpectedly. In general, the date of delivery was February 1st. "Oh, our baby is in a hurry to see the world," the mother fussed over her daughter. Miranda's neighbor drove them to the hospital. She wailed and prayed. Nancy was breathing hard. The night was frosty and starry. Fortunately, the labor was easy, and by morning Molly Patterson was born. The baby was born small, 50 centimeters tall, weighing 2,900. She had deep-set blonde hair and eyes. She quietly forbade when she was placed on the chest to her mother, and the latter cried with happiness. "My daughter, my darling, how happy I am with you. Everything's going to be all right. Mommy's here for you. I'll never betray you or leave you." Molly looked at Nancy with her bright, trusting carnations, as if to say that she understood and believed it all. For a few days Nancy recovered and got used to her new status as a nurse, and taught her how to hold the baby properly, to sing her competently, to find her, to feed her. All of this gave the girl great pleasure. On January 23rd, Nancy and Molly were discharged, and here a surprise awaited the young mother. She expected that Miranda and Christopher would come to meet her. But there were many more people. What kind of people? On the way out, Nancy noticed that there were many cars outside the window. 3 Jeeps stood out against them. The hospital was small. There were few women in labor, and Nancy wondered who the motorcade had come for. In the hallway, as expected, her mother and Christopher were waiting for her. They were holding pink balloons and flowers. The young mother smiled when she saw the familiar faces and walked towards them. but she froze when she saw Charles at the front door. He was holding a huge bouquet like the one he'd given her at the beginning of their affair. The guy looked confused and a little scared. "What is he doing here?" Nancy asked her mom in horror. "I don't know, daughter, honestly. I myself noticed him here just now," answered dumbfounded Miranda. "Well, let's go quickly from here, flowers, balloons to hand over," later said the girl. Instantly, she changed from a timid girl into a bold young woman. Motherhood only enhanced this transformation. But Charles blocked their way. "Nancy, I know this is my daughter," he declared, "and I've come for you. We need to talk and not get heated. Why did you hide the fact that you were pregnant? I just found out the other day from Kelly. I'm a father and I'm not giving up my status. In fact, I want to be there for my daughter as much as I want to be there for you. I don't want to see you. Go away." Nancy gave him a hard time. "Let me through. We have to get out." "I'm not just going out." Charles wouldn't stop. That's when Molly started crying. "My daughter needs to eat and go to bed." "Don't interfere," replied Nancy. After these words, the boy was forced to give in. In the fresh, frosty air, the young mother felt dizzy. She clasped the little girl even tighter to her and walked towards the parking lot. Even from afar, she noticed Charles' SUV standing there. But there was another surprise waiting for her. Out of one of the SUVs came none other than John. He was holding the same large bouquet as Charles. Nancy felt a sense of déjà vu. "What are you doing here?" The usually polite Nancy could not contain her emotions. John hesitated only for a moment and began his speech. "Hello, Nancy. I know I look like a fool, but I can't help it. I can't help it. I can't get you out of my head. I love you and I want to be with you. I've been thinking about it for months, and recently I decided to find out how your life turned out. I remembered that you chose someone else over me. I believed you were doing well. But it turns out your union broke up a long time ago and you left. I started making inquiries through my channels and found out that you were pregnant and the baby wasn't born. So I thought about it, and I've made up my mind. Marry me, and your baby is a girl, if I understand correctly. I adopted her. I promised to be a caring father for her, and for you, a loving and devoted husband." The man gave it to me straight and handed Nancy the flowers. She pushed the flowers away and barely held herself up to keep from sobbing. "Are you two conspiring?" "Christopher, let's get out of here." "Where's your car?" the girl asked her friend. He froze for a moment and then gestured toward the third black Jeep. "Here." She sits down. "What do you mean? Where did you get the money for such a car?" "It's worth a fortune." Nancy never ceased to be amazed by the day's events. "It's not my Jeep. I borrowed it from a friend of mine to give you and Molly a proper welcome, but I figured I'd make a fortune with a painting like this. I'm not doing so well, so I put it off, went back to fixing things up. You know my hands are golden, and I'm always in need of a handyman. It's a money-making job. I'm willing to work day and night to make sure you and Molly have the best. I promise I'll be back on my feet soon and we'll be fine. Nancy, you know exactly how I feel about you. And you also know that I would do anything for you. I've proved it 1,000 times in deed and not in word. Marry me and we'll have a threesome. Me, you, Molly. We'll have a happy ending, I promise." Christopher, shuffling from foot to foot to foot. And that was the end of Nancy's patience. "What are you guys doing here? You've all gone mad," she screamed, no longer holding back her crying. This frightened Molly and she started to scream too. "Shush, shush, 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 shush. Don't cry, Mommy. I'll never leave you and I'll never betray you. Let's go home now. While we feed you, we'll put you to sleep. You scared the children crazy. Mom, call a cab." Miranda obediently called a car to the maternity hospital and they went home. Nancy took a long time to recover from the sudden attack of all the suitors at once. All three kept writing and calling her, but she stubbornly ignored them. "I've had enough of these men," she explained her position to her mom. "First they promise a mountain of gold, and then they do the legwork. They're nothing but trouble. It's a good thing I had a daughter. They're my son. Honey, why are you doing this? Everything in this life is for a reason. Maybe if God sends you a second chance, you should take it." Miranda tried to talk her out of it. "It's going to be hard for us to do it on our own, girl." I know that. She needs her father. Yeah, she does. Well, I can understand Charles, but his mother really hurt us. Although, objectively speaking, her son had nothing to do with it. He'll be begging for your forgiveness later. But God be with Charles. But John's a solid man. I liked him older. So he's not a man to be trifled with. Yeah, he's rich too, but somehow I trust him. I don't know why. There's no excuse. I've been telling you about him for a long time. He's a good guy. Besides, what would he do for you? His words are just water. He's been planning to become a millionaire many times. He just doesn't have the energy to do it for long. He renovates a couple of apartments, and then he goes back to his Albert and the starving life of an artist. That's not even the point. You know, he's like a brother to me. I don't see him as a man. I don't even want to hear about Charles. And John, how did he end up here anyway? It's all very strange, Nancy thought aloud. And yet a doubt settled in her heart. When the first emotions subsided, she began to reason that globally her mother was right. Molly needs a father and her husband a support. But she had become too deeply entrenched in her relationship with Charles. But it was Molly's troubles that saved her from such a home. Nancy, learning the art of motherhood wasn't easy. It took a lot of effort, but brought much more joy. Fortunately, Molly turned out to be a calm and not capricious child. Life slowly settled into a certain direction. But then a new twist happened, to one that no one could have imagined. Suddenly, Miranda received a letter from America. When she saw the name of the addressee, she cried and covered her face with her hands. The message landed on the Peacock. Nancy picked it up from Peter Russo. "Mommy, who is it?" she asked the confused woman, but she answered nothing and continued to cry. Nancy realized everything. "Is that my father?" Miranda nodded silently. Her daughter's hands trembled. Her heart beat more frequently. Breathing came first. She opened the letter and began to read aloud. "Dear Miranda and Sam, it's Peter writing to you, or, as I am more often called, Peter. Dear Sam, this is probably the first time you've heard of me. Knowing your mother's character, I dare say she's never told you anything about me. Well, I'd be happy to be wrong. Well, I'll tell you our story anyway. We met 23 years ago. Your mom was 20, I was 21. I was what you might call the first guy. In the village, sassy, bold, daring, naturally used all these gifts and heard and caught and ace. Your mom was the complete opposite of me. Quiet, modest, noble. And opposites attract, as you know. I had no shortage of brides, but your mother outshone them all with her elegance and the dignity with which she held herself. I was enchanted. We began a passionate affair. Miranda was more modest, but there are devils in a quiet pool. Things progressed rapidly, and a couple months later she told me she was pregnant. She already had you under her belt. I was very scared, which I'm ashamed of now. But you can't turn back the past and you can't undo it. So all I can do is just state the facts. I was afraid of the responsibility and the family routine. Besides, I had big plans for my life. In particular, the possibility of going to America loomed. In those years, it was not easy. I asked your mother to come with me, even though I knew perfectly well that she wouldn't go anywhere with me. And frankly, I was glad she said no. But I went to meet my dream. Your mom told me when you were born. You probably don't know that I chose your name. I liked it very much. I sent you a gold chain as a present. It was the only thing I could afford at the time. At those words, Nancy touched her neck and fumbled for the chain she had worn since childhood, her only jewel of that caliber. Mom never told me who gave it to her. The girl exhaled. She continued reading. At this gift, our communication broke off. I got caught up in America, threw me out a lot. I traveled all over the country in search of a better life. But my chutzpah and boldness were always to my advantage and didn't let me get discouraged. As a result, I worked my way up from an ordinary mechanic to the owner of car dealerships, fulfilled the proverbial American dream. And now I can proudly say that I am a dollar millionaire. As for my personal life, it can be considered unsuccessful. I've been married 3 times. I had sincere feelings for my first wife, but unfortunately she tragically died, drowned in the ocean. A ridiculous death. The fact that she was pregnant added to the tragedy of the story. She and I waited for a son for a long time, and I agonized over this loss. But after a few years I remarried, rather from boredom and hopelessness. My wife turned out to be a selfish woman with a bad character. The marriage did not last long, and in the divorce she wanted to rob me to the ground. But I too was not a finger maid and defended my wealth. Then I married a third time. The woman was very nice. But our union also did not pass the test of time, and we decided to divorce. Again, I faced attempts to encroach on my fortune, though not as brazen as the last time. And once again I kept my own, leaving my ex-wife only a small apartment and a car. Never had kids. God didn't give them to me, probably as punishment for leaving you Miranda and Sam. But that's not my only punishment. The thing is, by the time you read this letter, I'll probably be on the other side of the world. I won't go into details, but I'll just say that cancer is a very unpleasant thing. My disease is progressing rapidly. I was diagnosed too late, and despite the opportunity to be treated in the best clinics with the best doctors, there is nothing that can be done about it. Well, let's not get sentimental. I feel a deep guilt before you and I want to make it up to you. That's why my only daughter bequeaths to you my entire fortune, namely $2,100,000, a penthouse and 2 CVs. That's more than enough for you and Mom to live on for the rest of your lives. And if you're smart and manage it right, you'll have enough for your grandchildren. I am very happy that when I am physically gone, I will continue to live on in my grandchildren. I do not ask you to forgive me, for I know that there is no forgiveness for me. I ask only that you try to be happy through my inheritance. Sincerely yours, Peter Wells, Township of Trent, State of New Jersey. Nancy finished reading, put the letter on the table, and sat down on the couch where Miranda was sitting. She was crying without stopping or removing her hands from her face. The daughter hugged her mother, and she whispered, "My sweet song, I will never forget you and I will always love you." Nancy found it hard to believe in the reality of what was happening. It seemed to her that the events of the last few weeks were just a dream. Soon she would wake up and everything would go back to normal. But a few days later she received a notice that she was the heiress of the millionaire Efros from the USA. The dream before her eyes turned into a meal that boded well. Drawing up the documents took a lot of time and effort, but finally by summer Nancy entered the inheritance. She had $2 million in her account. She was going to take care of the car at home later. The daughter and mother did not publicize their unexpected wealth anywhere. But as you know, the earth is full of rumors, and soon only a lazy person in the village did not talk about the untold fortune of yesterday's beggars. Nancy decided that they should move as soon as possible to avoid making enemies. Miranda agreed with her. The women decided not to return to the dusty, noisy city. In addition, with baby Molly in her arms, it was useful to grow up in the fresh air. Therefore, at the family council it was decided to buy a good house in an elite cottage village in the suburbs. In the future, Nancy decided to open a private school there, and now there was money for it. How to dispose of the remaining sums, she has not yet decided. The problem with buying a car was that Nancy didn't have a driver's license. Ironically, she had money for any car, but no driver's license. The girl decided to be sure to get one in the future, but it was going to take time. However, in order to look out for a cottage, it was necessary to travel freely. The first thing that came to mind was Christopher. But he had, as Nancy had suspected, returned to painting, and he no longer had any Jeep. Moreover, he decided to sell his old car to buy materials for his art and then organize an exhibition. Therefore, he could not be relied upon in this matter. The girl did not sleep for several nights, thinking about whether she should do what her heart told her to do, and yet she decided to listen to herself. Finally, on one of the sunny days, she called Charles and asked him to help her travel around the city and choose a good house. During the conversation with him, Nancy's heart wanted to race. Could it be that Mom was right, and we still have a chance to start over? Maybe we really should forget that awful wedding night. He who remembers old times, to him an eye out, the girl thought, realizing that she still loved Molly's father. He looked in love too. It seemed as if they had traveled back to the happy June of their first dates. Charles really helped Nancy choose a house. He approached the matter responsibly, studying the architecture, the materials used in the construction, and assessing the location. In the end, it was decided to settle on a 2-story penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a private pool in the yard. Molly will grow up and swim there. It's healthy, Nancy reasoned. Yes, "I want our daughter to grow up big," Charles echoed her. The young people got back together. This time Miranda had nothing against it. There was no alliance. To be more precise, in a more advantageous position this time was their family of dollar millionaires. But the woman composed herself at the onset of such thoughts, fearing to catch the star disease and arrogance, vices she felt were terrible. The deal was finalized quickly, and Charles and Nancy moved into the penthouse. Miranda and Molly also moved in. At first, it was like Miranda's fairy tale romance, the hassle of renovation. The house was completely livable, but still needed some remodeling. However, as time went by, Nancy noticed that Charles became less caring and attentive, and more often became interested in how his beloved wanted to dispose of the remaining money. The girl chased away thoughts of self-interest, but inevitably comparisons with the stingy and cruel mother of the chosen one came into her head. Miranda also noticed the changes and tried to convince herself that she was imagining it, but one evening she heard a conversation that put everything in its place. Nancy had gone to run an errand. Grandmother went outside for a walk with her granddaughter. Charles was alone in the house. On the doorstep, Miranda realized that she had forgotten Molly's favorite toy, or else the girl began to whimper. The woman returned to the house and froze when she heard Charles' words. "Yes, Mom, I understand perfectly well, but she won't tell me what she's going to do with the money. I guess she really hasn't decided yet. Yeah, I know the house, school, and car are just a drop in the bucket. There's still plenty of money left. I'll figure something out. I'm smart, money to money. That's the way it's going to be." "Don't worry," Charles grinned into the phone. Miranda clutched at her heart and almost fainted like she had at the wedding. But still, she found the strength to stay on her feet. She quietly went outside and, as she had planned, went for a walk with her granddaughter. But there were two thoughts running through her mind. The first was that people don't change after all. The second was how to tell Nancy about everything so as not to break her heart and prove that she wasn't lying. It was partly her fault that her daughter had gone back to her ex-husband. She was the one who convinced Nancy to give the boy a second chance, despite his vile mother. But as we know, no oranges are born of autumn. It took the woman several days to think about it. All the while she pretended that everything was all right and did not pretend to know the whole story. And that's despite what she's been given. It's not easy. Eventually she found a solution and secretly installed a CCTV camera in the living room that would describe the sound as well. Miranda knew that sooner or later Charles would repeat the conversation with his mother. The conversation didn't take long. A week later, while reviewing the tapes, Nancy's mother saw Charles talking on the phone, and he had the same satisfied smirk on his face as the day before. The woman turned on the sound. That was right, Charles was discussing Nancy's inheritance with her mother. Miranda gathered her courage and, guided by the principle that better the bitter truth than the sweet lie, showed the tape to Nancy. She cried, but soon pulled herself together. She needed to let out her emotions, but she didn't want to frighten her mother and her little daughter. She wanted someone to talk to. She dialed Christopher, and the answering machine went off. He was completely absorbed in his exhibit. Kelly came to mind. It had been a long time since they'd spoken, but in the past her restaurant colleague had always supported her and come to her aid. She didn't let her down this time either. The girl picked up the phone and agreed to a meeting. An hour later, the buddies were sitting in one of the city parks. Nancy told her the truth. Kelly listened to her friend and began her speech. "Listen, darling, it pains me to tell you this, but it has to be said. Charles came to your maternity ward for a reason. You think he really didn't find out until shortly before the birth? No, of course not. He's known for a long time. Word of mouth. But somehow it didn't encourage him to take you in and start caring for you. I guess his mama did some educational work and convinced him he didn't need a walker around his neck. What did she call you then? Bitch, of course, Rare. I quit their restaurant, by the way. I haven't found anything decent yet. I'm making shawarma at a stand nearby, but it's still better than working for scumbags. Well, I'm not talking about me right now. Back to Charles. Sad to say, but he found out about your inheritance before you did. Their family somehow miraculously intercepted your father's letter. So they decided to get clever and send Charles to you. Now you and Mom were no longer bearded beggars to them. They kept the letters for a while so you wouldn't get suspicious. And then, after the Charles maternity play, they sent it to you. But how do you know all this? Nancy wondered. Former co-workers at the Peacock's Nest told me that this information leaked out at the restaurant. I had the idea to warn you, to let you know. But then I thought I shouldn't get involved in other people's relationships. It doesn't usually end well. Otherwise, you'd think I was just jealous of you. And there it was. It was worth the warning, Kelly concluded. Well, thanks for telling me. It's better late than never. And thanks for listening. And now I have to go. I'll see you later, Nancy said, and went home. There she cried again, but quickly wiped her tears away, and then packed up Charles, who wasn't home at the time, and threw the bag over the fence. Back at the cottage, the guy was stunned. He started to break into the penthouse, but they wouldn't let him in. Nancy only put the phone on speakerphone. On an electronic call. Get out of here, you vile scumbag, son of your mother. I believed you again, you naive fool, I thought. You really want my love. I believed you wanted to be close to your daughter, but you're only interested in money. So go two families, shouted Nancy. Her words were carried all over the street, well heard by the neighbors. Charles had no choice but to leave with the words, "You'll regret it." Nancy was hurt again, but she had already learned how to take a punch. Everything that doesn't kill us makes us stronger. The girl had seen the truth of this truth on her own skin. Nancy had so many troubles that there was no time to be sad for long. First of all, she had to educate Molly and buy her the best things, like a real princess. Secondly, she finally studied at the driving school and got her license. Thirdly, the girl decided to thank the one who had been by her side for so many years and supported her in the most difficult moments. She bought the latest model of Jeep in a salon and drove it to Christopher's workshop. He was out on the balcony when he heard a loud car horn. "Hey, what are you guys making so much noise?" "Interfering with your work," he grumbled. "I'm sorry, young man, I was just testing." "Is everything okay with the sound in the car?" Nancy answered him, getting out of the car. "Nancy, what are you doing here? What's this all about?" The color-smeared guy wondered. "I mean, so you dreamed of a car like this? You got it. And don't you dare say no. Award this car as a token of appreciation for all you've done for me. And yes, I'll take care of the costs of organizing the exhibition too." "I've always wanted to be a patron of the arts," Nancy explained to him. Christopher ran out of the house and hugged his friend. "I'll give you everything, I promise. It will be enough if you just give me a couple of your paintings. I'm sure that very soon the critics will recognize you as a genius and your work will jump in price," Nancy told him and gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder. "It will." "You'll see," Christopher replied, unable to hold back his tears. Nancy felt a rush of strength and happiness. Good deeds had given wings after all. All that remained was to finish the repairs in the cottage at last. In particular, the bathroom on the second floor had to be finished at last. The mistress of the house herself went to the plumbing store. She didn't understand anything about it and walked confusedly between the rows, looking at faucets and sinks. "Can you tell me which firm is better to choose? Which one is the most reliable?" She threw a phrase in the air for looking at the goods. "Sure, I will." A familiar voice sounded from somewhere behind her back. Nancy turned around and saw John. He smiled welcomingly. "Hello, though," said Nancy, embarrassed. "I thought we had switched to you the last time we met." John said with the same smile, "I apologize. That time I gave in to my emotions. I am ashamed of my behavior," replied the girl and felt herself blushing. "I understand, don't worry, but let's get down to business. You are interested in sinks and faucet?" "That's right," John turned the conversation back to work. That's exactly what Nancy said. The man began to conduct a consultation in a very businesslike manner. The customer listened attentively, chose the goods she liked, paid for them, but at the checkout she couldn't help herself and asked her acquaintance a question. "John, what are you doing here?" "I work here. I own a chain of plumbing stores." "You must have forgotten," he explained. Yeah, that's right. But you're the owner, right? Why are you doing consultations?" "I serve customers as a salesperson," Nancy clarified. "That's right, I am the master, but I do counseling sometimes so I don't have to confess." "I come from a simple family, so I try to keep my feet on the ground," John answered her. He was restrained and behaved with dignity. He didn't say a word about his feelings. "I see. Thank you for the clarification." "Goodbye," said the fledgling Nancy goodbye to him. "Not a chance." "Goodbye, goodbye," John answered her. The man did not leave her mind for several days. His words about roots and the need to always remain human kept running through her mind. They motivated Nancy to do one more good deed. Soon she arrived in town and walked to the shawarma stand. "I'll have a cheese one, please." With a double portion of tomatoes, she told the people, peering out the window. She was surprised that her friend didn't say hello to her, but made an order at once. But there was nothing to do. She was at work. Having prepared the shawarma, she handed it to the customer. "Cheesy with double tomatoes. Bon appetit. That'll be $3. "Thank you, you'll pay," Nancy replied and held out her clenched fist to Kelly. She responded by holding out her open palm, expecting bills and coins to be placed in it. But Nancy placed the keys in her palm. "What are these?" The shawarma vendor wondered. "Keys to the restaurant where you'll be the chef," Nancy shouted. "Are you kidding me? This can't be happening." Kelly yelled back at her. It can. Let's pay in one day and go to settle our new nest," answered Nancy. "Oh, please, Talika, let's not call it a peacock's nest." The friends laughed. The next day they were already studying the room for the future restaurant. The work of transforming the space was going to be large-scale. The girls divided the duties and Nancy volunteered to do the plumbing. The same day she went to a familiar store. Her heart was pounding frantically just so long as it was in place. Just so long as it was in place. She thought to herself. Fortunately, John happened to be in the store. When Nancy saw him, she couldn't hide her emotions. "John, hello. Do I need you?" "Oh." The girl laughed. I need your help. I'm always ready to help you." "You know that," the man answered her with a smile. "It's good that you finally realized it." "Yes, it's really good," I replied, smiling embarrassedly. Nancy and the two of them, shoulder to shoulder, satisfied, walked through the store. Other shoppers wondered why an ordinary plumbing selection brought people so much joy. But Nancy and John knew very well that even when so much water has already flowed, everything can still be fixed if you find the right craftsman in time and choose the right materials.